So welcome to this session. The intention is to form a proposal with this group in relation to a driver. This is the driver here. And then to test it with consent decision making. Okay, so for those interested, the pattern is up there, proposal forming. And these lower posters here, these three lower ones, are like the detail. So we have a driver, and we're going to diverge before we converge. And the first step usually in proposal forming is this, to check is there consent to the driver, meaning is this a clear enough description of what's been happening and what's needed, and is it relevant for us to respond to? Could you, one of you, briefly introduce this, maybe read it, and if there's anything extra to say but not much, please do so.
The patient's journey from inpatient care, sometimes via specialized rehabilitation in the home, to our outpatient care. This journey takes longer than necessary due to resource bottlenecks, which at times can then multiply and negatively affect patient recovery and health.
Okay, so just in the topic of drivers, that's what's happening.
And we need to improve teamwork across all areas to prioritize patient needs and use our resources in the most efficient way.
Okay. Clear enough, everybody? We've had a conversation and made some preparation last night, but as a formality I want to check, and I'd like to introduce some hand signs. This means no objection. I don't see a reason not to, seems good enough. This means no objection. I don't see a reason not to, good enough, but I'm concerned for some reason. And this means I see a reason it's not good enough. This is going to cause us harm or miss a chance to improve. We call this objection, and we do it like this because it's a gift. It's a possible bit of wisdom we don't have yet, and we can learn from it and adapt what we do. So, any objections or concerns to this driver as being clear enough description, what's happening and what's needed, and relevant for us to respond to? Please show with your hands. We're going to move on to the next step. And the next step is called questions about the driver. And this is a chance, if you want to know more details about what's been happening and what's needed, this is the moment to ask those questions. Yeah. And Kajsa is going to just capture the answers on the flip chart, okay? Not the questions. So, we're going to use a pattern from S3 called rounds, which, as it sounds like, means going around. We can start with somebody, keep your question brief, we'll see if there's any answers, and if you don't have a question, pass. So, someone to begin with a question, and we go to the right to understand more about what's been happening and what's needed.
Yes, we have 4 teams in different rehabilitation levels, and how can they connect to each other in a better way? Okay,
so this is a great learning point because I think your question relates to the next step. Okay. Considerations as questions, right? And it's a good learning. We're not looking ahead now at possible solution space, but we're looking back at the situation. Okay, so there's 4 teams. So there's 4 teams involved. That's useful information. Let's go to the right. Marie, you have anything or just pass?
Yeah, I'm pretty curious to know what the resources are. So
Yep.
There's four teams. So the patient will go from team to team, like in a, like would one team follow one patient the whole way through? Or?
So just a few brief answers around this to give some context. Charlotte, I saw you shaking your head there. So.
They can do, but they don't have to. They can jump between the teams.
Mainly between the teams, how they connect connected to the patient, going to get better and better.
So, good enough, Victor? Okay, great. So I'm going to move us on from this step soon, because I know you have a lot of local knowledge, but I will check if there's questions. And I had one. Is there a specific bottleneck or a specific event that causes the problem most? I'll just invite any other essential questions to understand more about the driver. No? Okay. So any objection to this step is good enough for now? Safe enough to continue? Great. Okay, so we're going to go on to the next step. The next step will proceed after a breath. So take a moment to breathe and prepare yourself. So now we're turning our attention from the driver space towards the solution space. But before we get into all of our ideas about how to address this, what we're going to do instead is check what considerations do we have. This is the moment for your question, Charlotte. Could you read your question as an example, please?
We have 4 teams and they have a different rehabilitation level, and I wonder how they can connect to each other.
How can those teams connect to each other? Okay, so this is an example of what we call a generative question. It's a generative question because there's many possible answers to it. Yeah, okay. Did any of you come up with an information gathering question? Like specific information you would like to know during your inquiry last night and this morning? You did, Gertrude? Could you give us an example?
Are there facts we need to facilitate the work? For example, number of patients every week or number of treatments every day?
Exactly.
I don't know exact the questions, but
so
there might be facts.
Yeah, so it's a question that's seeking facts. Is there data on this? We are going to, in a moment, take a brief time to write down some considerations as questions on post-its. And I know you've been doing that already. So Victor, you might want to start right now, if you're staying. And after that exercise, we'll harvest them all, and then we'll see if there's answers to the information gathering questions, okay? This is about understanding constraints on what is possible. Is there a budget? How much time? Who needs to be involved? What are the limitations? Yeah, this is about understanding constraints. And this is about understanding possibilities. Oh, I'm wondering what the simplest thing is we could do. Yeah, wow, 10 ideas. Yeah, so possibilities and constraints. Do you need any more time, or are you good to go with this? We also recognize what an artful group looks like, because they prepare in advance what the driver is, and in a moment convenient to them, they put down some considerations as questions. So when we get to the meeting space, we don't waste time waiting for people to do it because it's already done. I'm going to ask we start somewhere, and then let's go around to the left this time. Maria, your question.
Yes.
Actually, Kaisha, maybe could you put these up? Is that an information gathering or generative question? Maria, I noticed you gave some preamble. You said a few things before your question, and that's fine because we do that. Okay. But I'm going to ask now, just read the question on your piece of paper. And if you have something similar, can you say bingo? So we don't have to put it up twice. Bingo, the same thing? If it's slightly different, please say, and we can put it there, but we could put them behind or, yeah, exactly. Okay, I pass. Victor.
So I guess a question would be, like, is there an introduction, or could there be an introduction for the patients towards the next level?
Generative? I think so too, yeah. Okay. Maria.
How can we motivate people working with this change?
Okay.
Something similar. Can the teams tolerate and work with each other? Do they understand each other's needs?
Bingo. Does the teams know enough of other teams' work?
Okay, Marie?
I was thinking about how the information will transfer between the teams.
How will information, or how does information transfer? How will or how does?
How does.
How does, so information gathering. If it's how will, it's generative, right?
I just have a bingo to Maria's last one. How do we facilitate the meetings between the teams?
How do we facilitate the meetings among and between the teams? Okay, I will pass. Victor, any more? Marie? Charlotte? Anybody? Okay, any objections to this step as complete enough for now? Safe enough to continue? Great! Okay, thank you so much for doing the homework. Doesn't it make it easier? Yeah. Okay, fantastic. So, the next step is to answer information gathering questions that can be answered. There's many ways we could do this. One might be take one at a time and ask and get answers. I would like to invite a slightly more dynamic approach to this, and that is in a moment to invite you to grab a Sharpie each, stand up around the board there, and start putting down any answers you have to these questions, any data. If you need to talk with each other about it first, do, and this way you can rapidly learn from each other. And the only constraint I will set is about a 2-minute time box for the sake of the exercise, okay? So just high-level basic information that might be useful. Okay? And while you do that, if you don't mind, I'll just check in if there's any questions. So okay, so grab a Sharpie, get in there, make the most of your time. And meanwhile, if we zoom out a minute, any questions to understand the process so far?
It's like conscious this small amount of time for,
Mhm.
because I get a little bit stressed,
Mhm.
but I think you have an idea about what you're doing. So
Yeah, great question. So, what's necessary and what's valuable is a good question to ask. We're in a false environment right now, but with a real topic. Do what suits you. There's no rule around time. But be mindful that sometimes a time constraint brings more value than not having one at all.
So what are your thoughts about having these informations at this step and not before the meeting?
S3 patterns, adaptable according to context. Yeah, we've got a pattern called adapt patterns to context. So, if you think, well, we can harvest information gathering questions before the event, we can send them out and have a Google Doc where people add the data already, then do it beforehand, if that makes sense. Yeah, this is not the gospel. This is not how it should be done. This is just showing you a coherent journey that you can adapt according to context.
There's something fresh about not informing too much, because we often, in our ambition to help people understand, we can overload with information. So this kind of also brings up the curiosity of, I
Mhm.
want to know more.
Thank you. No, it's a useful point. And in my experience, this normally takes about as long as it's taken right now. It doesn't usually need more than that. Okay, folks, your time is well up. Is it good enough for now? Yeah. Are there any considerations there that are absolutely essential to address in whatever proposal comes up? Any of these? Come and take a look. If you can't read it from a distance, it's fine. Anything that would be absolutely priority to address. In fact, I'm going to give you even more of a challenge. Move these, so that one, and any others that should be higher or lower, move them. And if there's a dispute, just put it like that and we can talk about it afterwards. Yep. Yep. Anything else? Move it. Go for it. You can just... Is good enough? Okay. Great. Because we want to make sure if there's important considerations to address, that they are considered in solutions. Okay. So, we're going to go on to the next sheet. Ideas. Would one of you be willing to begin, and let's go to the right? We just hear the idea. If you have a bingo, and any added information, great.
But, meetings and workshops where the teams can meet and exchange experience so that they co-evolve.
Okay, thank you. Great. Maria.
The team coordinators in the 3 teams meet.
Team coordinators meet. I think I've got something similar. Delegate circle, it's a pattern from S3. So reps from the different teams and other key stakeholders with shared accountability for the whole patient journey. Yeah, from beginning to end. So
let the teams to change their structures together by setting the patient in the center.
Have evaluations made by patients.
It's very easy to forget that
Yeah.
one.
Good
so
you came,
I'm
Victor.
grateful for it.
Any more? Checking around? Okay, so any objection? Is this harvest is good enough for now? Safe enough to continue? Great. Okay. So, there's one more step in proposal forming. Form the proposal. We've got a lot of data here, we've got a lot of information, we've got a lot of considerations and ideas, but we don't have a proposal, right? By virtue of the fact we all participated till now, we don't necessarily all have to participate in the next step, because there's a good chance we'll go back into the same process in different places again. But what we do need to get from this is a proposal. Do you notice I said proposal, not agreement? It's a proposition to address this, a next iterative step. Not necessarily a whole strategic solution, although it may be, but it's what we're looking for is a next iterative step, considering the constraints of what's possible now, and considering the fact that 1 in 12 decisions are always wrong and have a negative impact on the organization. Yeah, so how do we take an iterative next step, learn from experience, and build incrementally? Okay, so we need what we call in S3 tuners. This is not a big fish. No. This is like a piano tuner. Yeah, people who are going to tune and find resonance between different ideas and come up with a good enough for now proposal. There's a couple of things to consider here. We don't have to use all the ideas. We don't have to use any of these ideas. It might be something inspired by these ideas. But what we do want to have is, in the opinion of the tuners at least, a good enough for now, safe enough to try proposal. Okay? And there's 3 factors I would like us to consider in choosing who tunes us. 1, I'd like to ask who should be there. Who should be there in that process? Is there anyone in this circle who should be there? I thought so. Gertrude should be there. And probably other stakeholders as well, right? But they're not here, so we can't do that right now. Okay. Who would enjoy to be there? Who's thinking, I would love to spend part of my lunchtime putting this together? And is there anyone else who could be there? I mean, anyone else with specific expertise, not here, that we could invite in who you think would be valuable to have? Yeah? Where is he? Oh, Phil, there. Okay, Phil. Okay, so that's it then, let's go. But wait a minute. What if Phil's working for the mafia and I know it? Yeah? Or what if Gertrude's got her hand in the purse of the organization and she's gonna tune a proposal to snatch it all out and disrupt everything? Yeah? Maybe we could check, first of all, are there any objections or concerns for these people to tune the proposal? Yeah. So, any objections or concerns to Marie, Charlotte, Gertrude, and the support of Phil to tune this proposal? Let's check. We have an objection. And we have one objection. Marie. You think these 2 guys should be there? What,
Yeah.
because?
Because one of them is a doctor and one of them is an occupational therapist, and they are working with these things. They are the ones who are doing the job.
Okay. I'd like to check.
They should be with us.
Can I check? Do people relate to this argument? I'll come to you in just a moment, if I may. So I'd like to check, do people relate to this argument that Marie's been? Yeah, it's making sense. It's not that it makes sense to everybody, but I'm just validating it enough. Can people relate? Didn't you say something similar, Phil? You used a similar approach. Can people relate to this? It's good enough. It's a safety check. You're not tripping. It's true. Yeah, there's value in this. Okay, great. So the amendment to the proposal would be what?
That we all do.
That you all do it?
Yeah.
Okay, and Phil. Okay, let's see if there's any objections or concerns to this. Yeah. Let's play a game. Hold your hand up when you're ready, but don't show your cards yet. It's like scissors, paper, stone. When you're ready? Okay. Are you ready? And on 3 we'll show our cards. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we have one objection. James, why do you object? Well, I know from experience that 3 is already a lot, 4 is too many, and 5 will be profoundly ineffective. I just know that from experience of seeing this many times. Can you relate to that? Okay. So, any suggestions, anyone, on how we might amend this proposal?
Maybe I just step back.
Okay.
Because if I'm within a group, I might dominate it. So maybe I step outside.
Okay.
And because I am sure that you will do it very
Okay.
well.
So the argument is this. From Gertrude's perspective, others can come up with a good enough for now proposal. It's not an agreement. And Gertrude's going to be there to say if there's objections or concerns later. So her proposition is she steps back, you three, with the support of Phil, look at this together. Yeah?
5 with Phil.
With you as well? Okay, I object again. Sorry. No, it's too much. It's too much, folks. You're in the consensus trap. We all need to be there. We all need to do it. Remember, you were all here for this, yeah, and you will all be there again when we test if it's good enough. 3 is usually adequate. I'm going to suggest in a minute Phil just sits there on the wall and maybe jumps in with anything that comes out, but let 3 of you do it. So just to be transparent, I will object all the time until we're down to 3. So, any suggestions?
Then I can do a Gertrude. I can back off and leave it to you three.
Charlotte, Marie, and Alexandras. Okay, and with Phil jumping in if required. Any objections or concerns to this? Let's just see. Good enough? Yeah. But what about my lunch? He says, what about my lunch? Okay, great. So, we have an agreement, okay, on tuners. And you will see after lunch why it really doesn't matter if some of us aren't there. In fact, it adds value that many of us are not there for that process. Yeah, it's going to add value with what we do next. Okay, great. So, one more thing we need to know before lunch, so that you can fulfill your task, is what are useful ingredients in a proposal?
The why.
Also known as the driver, yeah? The driver. Okay, so it's useful to have the driver. You don't have to write it again yourselves now because we have it beautifully illustrated here. Okay, but the driver. What else is useful to include in a written proposal? Yeah.
Concrete actions and who's responsible.
The concrete actions, the proposal text, yeah? Concrete actions and who's accountable for it, okay? You remember I said earlier that example where in the dependencies mapping we make sure there's a named person who says, yes, I will keep an eye on this, not do it necessarily, but make sure it's happening. And we might also have, and all of the teams are accountable, yeah? So who's accountable, actionable steps, the driver, what else might be useful information to include in a proposal?
Could be a time perspective.
Could be a time perspective. So don't have due dates unless it's necessary. It will stress you out. In English we call it deadline. I think that's a very telling, to get the idea when it's necessary to talk about due dates and when not to. Yeah. But what other time consideration might we have besides due dates? Do you have anything else? Anyone? A review date. Greta, have you been to an S3 course previously? I thought so.
I'm going again.
Review date. An explicit, intentional agreement to review this at a certain point in time. And when that time comes, it comes onto your governance agenda and you make it conscious and you review it at the latest at this time. And what might we consider when we evaluate an agreement? What other things might we have in a proposal text? Evaluation criteria. Yeah, what will we measure against? What metrics do we consider? What's our definition of done? What are our intended outcomes? So that when we evaluate, we have some coherent things to reflect on and ask, did it work? Did this happen? Is it yada, yada, yada? And we can build that over time with each evaluation.